expressed to me by the Milford folks is, it's not that they don't necessarily have an interest, but what would be expected of them in order to be qualified to receive, and then once they receive to handle the money, they didn't feel they were that well equipped to do it, and that probably drove more of why they kind of pushed back. So obviously these other two districts may very well have the capacity to follow through, but the risk we take and the chance we take is maybe at some point they also will find themselves coming to that decision saying, well, maybe rather than pushing hard now, we fall back, regroup, and maybe come back next year, as what was indicated to Mr. Wassig by the Milford folks, with maybe a more reasoned, timely proposal. So my concern would be is that, what would happen to those funds if we didn't allocate them today? Do we have to go back through another 45-day review period? So maybe the action that we would take today would be to award all the money provisionally to the sheriff at this time. And he's obviously not going to spend $145,000 between now and, let's say, the end of July or the 6th of August. If between now and that time period we go ahead and advertise these others, if they choose to follow through and complete the process, then obviously we could then reduce the sheriff's allocation by an appropriate amount to give the additional award to these two. So the sheriff would have somewhere between $127,000 and $145,000 in that scenario. It wouldn't require all this to come back before the board and the board go through that process. So
we would have to publicly notice and come back and discuss the two special districts items prior to
No, I
September
realize
30th.
that. We have to go through that process. But between now and September 30th, if either one or both of them were to fall apart and not be done, they just said, hey, we don't want to do just like what the Fire Safe Council did to us. I mean, they had it all going to them, and then they came in and said, we don't want it, and so now we're scrambling to figure out how to deal with these monies before we lose it. That's the concern I have, is I don't want to see those funds being lost because of that, maybe a last minute change of mind or change of heart. So in that sense, I would say that we award the $127,000 firm, and we provisionally, the remainder would be available to the sheriff if the other two processes don't complete themselves. If they complete themselves, no problem. If they don't complete themselves, we automatically allocate those funds by action today to the sheriff. So we add it to them so that come September 30th, there's no questions. The monies are allocated, we don't lose them. See, that's the issue that we risk if we don't, come up with some sort of a provision. And that's what I encourage the board to consider if we do this.
All right, again, Supervisor Pyle, you had a comment on that, or Supervisor Wassig? Under board comment.
Yeah, I thought he mentioned that the work at the Spalding was just completed. Is that different work than this? Or just the same stuff?
On the community wildfire protection plans, I believe that has to be coordinated with the Forest Service. On the Firewise communities, that has to be based on a plan that is certified and renewed every 12 months. So as long as they're recognized and they're working on a plan that has been approved, they shouldn't have any issues spending the money as long as they follow what the guidelines say is allowable.
And these amounts are a lot, lesser value than what the Milford was going to be. I'm quite confident. James was pretty savvy with that help.
Well, they were the leaders of the whole movement to begin with, so they have that.
I mean, you can see why Milford would be nervous. That was a couple $100,000. I don't think they've been involved before, but this is 11.5 and a $7,000 project. I'm comfortable with it. I see those through.
Bob, you had a question?
Yeah.
Comment?
I don't think it's correct for us to second guess whether these districts have the ability to follow through and make it work. I mean, we would have to have more knowledge to make that decision. Spalding CSD does have a general manager on payroll, and he is quite confident in getting the job done, which is Chris Gallagher, and he did call me and I talked to him last night. And I did not appoint Chris Gallagher to his position. He was hired by the Spalding CSD.
Didn't say a word, Bob.
All right, let's try and keep on point here. We're running behind on our agenda.
So, I mean, I would be in very much support of Spalding CSD getting their $7,000, the Janesville Town Council. I think they're quite confident. If they don't, that's their issue, not ours. I mean, and the remainder, just to $127,000 to the sheriff minus our costs, which you usually just brought up. And, that's what I would support.
Mr. Chairman, if
Mr.
I
President,
may
go
respond,
ahead.
first of all, I'm not suggesting that either Spalding or Janesville is not capable of doing. My concern is, because I think, first of all, Janesville, I think, has been the leader in the fire safe movement from the get-go. I think they were the original one, if I'm not mistaken, but they were at least one of the early ones. And so I think they're very capable of following through with this project. And the same, I think, even with the Spalding proposal. My only concern is that if they decide not to, or for whatever reason the process falls apart, we should have the contingency so that it would be able to back up. I'm 100% in favor of us working with those two communities to allocate the use of those funds in that fashion. There's more than enough. The sheriff initially was only looking for $5,000 or $7,000.
Right, exactly.
So the fact that there's
We'll take a comment.
$27,000, that's far beyond what the sheriff initially envisioned. And I appreciate the fact that he sees the opportunity to use these funds maybe in a broader fashion and to address the use of the funds in the manner in which is being proposed. I just want to make sure that come September 30th, for some reason, if there is a glitch that develops that precludes either Janesville or Spalding from being able to complete the process, that those funds can shift automatically to the sheriff's allocation. Hopefully that won't be the case, that's just a contingency.
We could put that in the motion.
And that was what I was suggesting as a motion, as part of the motion, is that we provide for that kind of an automatic trigger to allow for the sheriff to assume those funds if the other entities aren't able to complete the process. I'm not doubtful that they will.
Very good list. You bet, Aaron.
Real quick, Julie, earlier when this whole process started, the sheriff just requested $5,000. Is that $5,000 has already been out for the 45-day comment period, or is that just held off and nothing's been done?
It was posted, and then when the fire safe, it was posted 45 days ago, plus the $5,000 original request. When the Fire Safe Council rescinded their request for the money, the following week I posted the remaining balance to be considered for the sheriff's purposes, so that we would not be in a position September 30th to not be able to use the money.
So I guess my question is now, so if that 5,000 was already posted, is the total amount gonna be 150,000 now?
It's posted to give the whole 145,600 plus or minus interest and reimbursement for posting to the sheriff's department, and that has been 45-day notice and for open public comment.
So potentially this new one will supersede the old?
Right.
Yes.
Correct.
Exactly.
Thank you.
It was two pieces, the original and then the balance.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, this is,
So if I understand the consensus of the board, a motion to approve the 2,000 money, 933 to the sheriff, contingently 145 new money to the sheriff. I'm sorry, Section A, approve the allocation to Spalding and Janesville, the balance to the sheriff minus costs, with the understanding that if either Spalding or Janesville doesn't, are not able to perform, their money would then go to the sheriff.
Right.
That's what I was.
And that's Bob's motion, and I'll second it.
it's been moved by Supervisor Chapman, by Supervisor Powell, seconded by Supervisor Chapman, but we're certainly gonna take public comment, which we are required to do. And I know we're running over. Colonel Dexter, do you have an extra few minutes, sir?
He's
I want to take
he's
you away
on
from
every
duty.
time.
We'll go ahead then and open this up for the public comment. Is there anybody in the audience? I know Sheriff Groudon, you had your hand up. We'd be happy to hear from you, sir. Thank you very much for coming.
All right, good morning, Dean Groudon, Sheriff. Yeah, I support the motion. Obviously, we support any of the community projects, fire safe projects. You know, but the main thing is we don't want the money just to go away. It's available to our county for a reason, to offset costs, and that's what we'll be doing with it. We haven't used it for those purposes in the past. But without the money, we're still gonna respond to emergencies on national forest lands. But if we can use it to offset some of the costs to the county, we need to do so. So I support your motion. A little more, in addition, Julie mentioned some of the things, you know, that we can reimburse costs for: search and rescue, firefighting, responding to floods, tsunamis, landslides, avalanches, tornadoes, high wind events, medical emergencies, first aid, to prevent risk of human injury or death or damage to property, So it's a wide range of emergencies that we commonly respond to on national forest lands. So what we're gonna do is provide some training to our people on how, identifying which calls for service would be eligible for reimbursement. So I'd recommend that any sequestration come from the allocation to us, because again, it's reimbursement anyways, and we're gonna go whether or not this money's there. So, any questions for me?
Do you have any questions? Dean, thanks for working with Julie on this. Julie, thank you. I think this will be.
Well, Julie's been a good help, so appreciate it.
Anytime we can help your budget, Dean, we're happy to do so. Anybody else in the audience wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second, if I'm not mistaken, under discussion.
Yeah.
Supervisor Alba?
You know, I'm very nervous about this, just because of the, not that I wanna take anything away from being a sheriff's department by any means, but just with the limited scope and use of this money. I mean, we heard it before from when the fire safety council was here and with other discussions I've had. It's very limited and narrow focus. And I'm afraid of, that it just might get turned around and miscued, one way or another. And, it goes back to, that's why we had the MOU with the fire safety council, was to go into all these little special districts that may and or may not have the capabilities or the personnel to handle applying for these other grants for matching funds, et cetera. And maybe that's where Milford stands. I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody, I don't know their situation. But all looked as a go when the fire safety council was back in effect. Then of course, for whatever reason, they realized the MOU would run out, and so here we are, so now we're left with nothing. And so I think it reiterates the importance of getting that MOU reestablished, so that you have, whether it be with the fire safety council or somebody else, it doesn't matter, so that you have that one entity that can help out these smaller districts to combine to use these funds, to leverage, so that we can get our projects done in our communities, to do the grants, to implement the work, because a lot of these smaller districts don't have that expertise or manpower or dollars to do it. And I don't know, this whole thing just makes me nervous of putting it all to the sheriff, and was not so sure on what we do with the residual. Do we have to pay it back, or do we have to pay the whole thing back, or part of it back, or give back the money? Nobody knows the right answer to that.
If we don't give it to one of the 3 allowable purposes and 45-day notice it by September 30th, we will give the money back.
But,
You don't have to spend it because the sheriff's a reimbursement basis. It's the only one of the 3 that's a reimbursement basis. So the Firewise communities and community wildfire protection plans, as long as they're following the guidelines of, having their certification and using the money within a 12-month period to renew or communicate with community members on how to space clear their homes and what materials to use, they can have the money, as long as they're gonna follow the plan. And then they certify to the county that that's what they're using it for.
So I guess my other question is it possible to get an MOU reestablished by the end of the 30-day comment period?
I believe the MOU process is a multi-agency document that I did receive, or obtain a copy of it from 2006, and I wasn't involved in that process, but that's a multi-agency. I believe it's CAL FIRE and Forest Service
So
and
it's gonna take a long
BLM
time.
and Fire Safety Council and all the participants, so I think that's a longer process than that.
I think that'd be more appropriately redone for next year.
Yeah, but my suggestion is it cannot happen this year. For next year, yes.
That was the,
But that was in place and we were turned down, so they said we don't want the money. So, area,
Right,
where
it
do you
was,
want to go?
but the MOU was outdated, so
Well, yeah, but that,
But
okay,
it could
whatever.
be, and it could be, Bob, I don't know, but I'm just.
They had a chance to get the money, turned it down, and left us the last minute scrambling around trying to figure out what to do with the money before the deadline come, and we gotta give it back.
I'm not arguing with you on that, I'm not arguing with you.
If you wanna try to get a new MOU for next year, I support it 100%.
Well, that's what I was wondering, didn't know if we
We
could.
can't do it, we can't do it with this money.
And I think,
That was my question.
I think the record should show, Mr. Chairman, that they turned it down on once, actually.
Actually, that is correct, Supervisor Chavez.
And so anyway, so that's where I stand on this is, I think we need to get the MOU so that we have with fire safe council or somebody else, it doesn't matter, just so we have that entity to help utilize these funds in appropriate.
And leverage.
And
Your point on leverage is well taken. Dean?
All right. So I did a lot of research like Julie did. We can't see, as long as it's obligated, we can't see any deadline by which it has to be expended. I mean, you look at this agenda item, there's some money left over from 2007 still. So, I mean, this is probably a stopgap, and I agree with you, Aaron, it's a limited scope what we could utilize the funds for, but we've gotta use it for something. And the only thing I could come that could even give us any kind of indication of a timeline was reported they had specific dates for 2014, 2015, by which we had to submit the certification forms. But that was it. There's no, that I could find, or Julie could find, there was no deadline by which we had to spend the money.
After it's appropriated by us, there's no deadline.
Yes, once it's obligated, other than the deadline of September 30th of this year.
We have a
would
deadline, but you don't.
Not that we can find.
Correct.
So, and the one thing I don't know, is it, once it's obligated, can you change the purpose later? You know?
I don't think so.
Thanks, because you had to have a public comment period and all.
Well, but if you did the public comment period.
I know, but that was for what we're allocating for. You can't make something
I don't
different.
think we can undo
Okay.
it.
I would guess no. I mean, I'm not county council, but I'm trying to be.
Jim?
Contact
Chairman,
Sure. Let's see if we can kind of wrap.
One thing I would like to make sure that we don't lose sight of, and I appreciate what the sheriff is proposing, but the reality, you're gonna respond to whatever the incidents will be forthcoming in the future within those narrow guidelines. And as you have in the past, and those expenses to do that have been borne primarily by the general fund. So if nothing else, what this does is it sets up at a minimum about $125,000 as a contingency fund to cover those future expenses that we know.
Translate into a deputy or
And
two.
to me, that benefits the community as a whole. So as we sort out the other issues with the fire safe folks and whatever, and then review, in the meantime, at least we are able to utilize these funds to fund those future needs. Now, hopefully, we won't have a need for the use of those funds, but if and when that day comes, we're not gonna be scrambling within the budget trying to figure out how we're gonna maybe necessarily cover them as we've had in the past if we have, a lot of disasters hit you all at once. So at least it gives us some public benefit that way. And I think that seems to get lost in the shuffle as we're dealing with the other end of the equation. And I appreciate the fact that you guys have figured out that as an option. And I think in the future, as we consider the allocation of these kind of funds, that's something depending upon what record you develop tracking these and monitoring those, that would be a legitimate item to be applying for to use these funds as part of a balance.
And a couple of the events that have happened in the last couple of years that would really do some damage to our budgets would be the event up in Mendocino County, where they had the armed guy in the national forest for 45 days, or I don't remember the time frame, but it was a long period of time. That cost a ton of money out to providing security for people that lived in the area and so on. There was the other one recently where the guy murdered his family in Singletown,
And then he's over.
and then fled to the coast and was out in some national forest land there. Those are some odd examples, but there's some things that we might not think about. If we had, God forbid, something like that occurred around
Well,
here.
and in addition, I mean, just with the moonlight fire that we had here not too long ago over the hill and the impact it had in terms of law enforcement services, dealing with the evacuations and dealing with the impacts of that particular fire.
I agree with you. So I think, and I think over the next year or two, we'll get some good information about how many calls for service, what are the true costs of responding to emergencies on national forest lands, but there's always gonna be those outliers, those real large events that could cost us a lot of money in a very short period of time. But I understand your concern, I agree with you, Aaron, it's a narrow scope, but it's gotta be obligated for something, and hopefully over the next year, we can work on relationships with the Fire Safe Council or the other districts themselves.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Would the maker of the motion restate the motion? Like staff restate. Supervisor Pyle, I believe, made the motion.
Supervisor Pyle,
Chapman seconded.
moved that the public comment period be opened, that we approve the allocation of $933 to the sheriff's department, that we approve the request for funds for both Janesville and Spalding, with the balance minus county costs going to the sheriff's office.
Minus, the cost.
Minus county costs, I said.
You said.
You said.
And the proviso that if the other two, the fires, Janesville, are not completed by September 30th, that those funds
Would be then reallocated to the sheriff's.
right,
Automatic.
automatic.
You're the maker of the motion, Supervisor
That
Pyle,
is
is
correct. That is the correct motion.
That's
that?
correct.
You're the second.
I second that.
Is there any further discussion by board members or anybody in the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposition?
Nay.
Duly noted. Passes 4-1. Okay,
Just
thank-
one additional.
Yes,
What I will do then is I will move forward and post the two requests from the special districts for the money in the paper. And I will ask them to come in 45 days and be part of the public comment period and address how they're going to utilize the money. Is that the
Don't wait
direction?
till August 6th, you can post it like this week.
Yeah, I will, as soon as I get it in the paper, but then I'll communicate with them to see if I can't get a representative to come and talk about how they're gonna, what their plan is.
okay, thank you. If you'd like to move directly to item D4. D4 is Colonel Chris Dexter. Obviously, Colonel Dexter is commander at Sierra Army Depot and accompanied by Lori McDonald. And Colonel Dexter, it's been a pleasure to work with you over the years. And I realize that you're close to departure, but very happy to welcome you to the boardroom and thank you for your service to your country and the community. And again, I've noted many times, Sierra Army Depot, there's more commerce that goes in and out of that depot than all the rest of the county combined by a very large factor. And thank you very much for taking the time to come. I apologize for our tardiness, but we ran a little over. Good morning, Colonel Dexter.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'd just like to take a couple minutes of your time. I read your minutes from the last meeting, sir, and it says here you got a 3-minute time limit, so I'm not sure I tried
We're
very
not
hard.
gonna hold you to that.
I tried very hard to abide
At
by
the
that.
discretion of the chair.
That's for public comment.
That's for public, yeah, that's for
Well,
public.
this is a
comment.
public comment, I guess, that's sir. But first off, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody here for the relationship that we've had over the last few years at the depot with the county supervisors. And I really hope that that relationship will continue. Sir, as we're in District 5, you and I have got to spend a little bit of time together, and then we hosted the rest of you guys for a visit, I think it was back in February, and I thought the visit went very well. We were glad to have you out there, and anytime we can host you out there on the depot and let you know what's going on, you guys are always welcome out there. I'd like to just give a couple of quick updates. One, I think we talked about it in February, we had lost the Global War on Terror, or also known as the GWAT Hiring Authority, and that was about 550 to 600 people that were going to lose their jobs if we didn't get a new hiring authority. Since that time, we did get a new hiring authority, the term hiring authority, and we're going through the process now of getting applications in and offering jobs out to folks. And unfortunately, because it's a different hiring authority, there's different rules. So we're not going to see a one-for-one. The current 545 or so employees will not naturally migrate over to those positions because they may not qualify. There's certain qualifications for them. But we do believe we'll get a high percentage of those, and then, of course, other folks to backfill those as well. So there will be a bit of an impact to the community. Some people will not get jobs in the future. We also started, everybody's familiar with the term sequestration and furlough. We started furloughing the depot employees yesterday. We will furlough 8 hours a week, 16 hours a pay period, from now until the end of the fiscal year, a total of 11 weeks. And that started yesterday, and what we're doing is 2 hours a day off the top. We were a 4-10, we work 4 days a week, 10 hours a day. We're now doing 4 8s to get those 8 hours. So you'll see the mass exodus coming off the depot will be at 1,500 hours instead of 1,700 hours. So if you can stay off the roads at that time, I'd highly recommend it. And then the last thing, that has had absolutely zero impact on our workload on the depot. We still have the work there, but government employees, government has decreed that we will furlough for 8 hours a week, so we're doing that. So a lot of that work will carry over into next year. Our projections for next year remain high. So I do believe we'll still continue to have a good amount of work and keep the current number of employees out there on the depot employed. I don't see any impact as of right now as we downsize out of the theater of operations on our level of employment, just for your information. And if I could, I'd just really like to thank not only the supervisors, but the community as a whole. I know that, for example, the Laston rural bus service has been very flexible in supporting all our needs at the depot as well, changes in our schedule. I'd like to thank the community as well for their support of the depot and its employees, and of course our mission for the Army and the soldiers that are deployed. And as you mentioned, sir, we'll change command with the depot on the 24th, so that's not next Wednesday, the following Wednesday. 09, Lord? My wife asked me that the other day, I didn't know either, so I gotta make sure I take that home, but thank you. 0900 hours on the 24th, we'd love to see everybody out there. We'll have a big ceremony, and Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Slauson, who I know Lori's gonna drag out here to the supervisor's board, so you guys can meet him, but he'll be there, obviously taking the flag from me. And I just hope that the relationship that we've had over time will continue to exist with Charlie. I know on his end, he's excited to get out here and be a part of the community as well. And then just if I could, Laurie said this isn't a court, so I don't have to request permission to approach the bench right there, but as a token of appreciation, I'd just like to thank the supervisor. We got a coin here, sir, if I can shake your hand real quick. There we go. This is the depot coin, for those of you that don't know the tradition of the coins. It started back in World War I. A fighter pilot shot down behind enemy lines. French resistance captured him, and they were actually going to execute him, but he was able to identify that he was an ally by showing his unit coin. The other side of that is, if I see you in a bar and I pull out my coin and you don't have yours, you have to buy me a beer, sir. As I understand it, this and $5 will get you a Starbucks. And pending your questions.
Board members, audience, have any questions? Board members? Audience, any questions or comments?
Great job you did.
Your next duty station.
Fort Lee, Virginia, sir. Hot and humid, sea level.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to clarify that 0900 hours is 9 a.m.
Sometimes we do speak a foreign language, thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just have to say, I appreciate the work that Colonel Dexter has brought to his mission here. Very successful. I've had an opportunity to work with a number of the colonels, the base commanders over the years, and you definitely stepped to the plate and excelled at what you did. I know when he was the change of command, I think you were the youngest colonel to take command out here in the history of the, if not the youngest, he was like one of the youngest, and I was going to say you did everybody proud, so thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colonel Dexter.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that will take care of our agenda items. As was announced earlier, we did not have a closed session this morning as agendized, and we are going to take up our closed session item immediately following open session, which would be now. And we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to come back and we'll go into closed session after taking a public comment break. So take a 5-minute break. Thank you.